outside. A teenager riding his bike saw me kick a tire and say a few choice words. "What's wrong?" he asked. Just a second, I'm going to put the mic on. "What's wrong?" he asked. I explained my situation. "But even if I could call my wife," I said, "she can't bring me the key since this is our only car." He handed me his cell phone. "Call your wife and tell her I'm coming to get her key. That's 7 miles round trip." "Don't worry about it." An hour later, he returned with my key. I offered him some money, but he refused. "Let's just say I needed the exercise," he said. 2 firefighters were waiting in line at a fast food restaurant when the siren sounded on their fire truck parked outside. As they turned to leave, a couple who had just received their order handed their food to the firefighters. The couple then got back in line to reorder. Doubling down on their selfless act, the manager refused to take their money. A woman at our yard sale wore a perfume that smelled heavenly and familiar. "What are you wearing?" I asked. "White shoulders," she said. Suddenly I was bowled over by a flood of memories. White shoulders was the one gift I could count on at Christmas from my late mother. We chatted a while, and she bought some things and left. A few hours later, she returned holding a new bottle of white shoulders. I don't recall which of us started crying first. Before work one day last December, I stopped at a deli and ordered out an everything bagel with cream cheese. It was toasty warm, and I couldn't wait to dig in. But just as I left the store, I noticed an older, indignant gentleman sitting at the bus stop. Knowing it would probably be his only warm meal of the day, I gave him the bagel. But all was not lost for me. Another customer from the deli offered me half of her bagel. I was so delighted because I realized that in one way or another, we are all looked after. You can look up online, generous acts of kindness. Look at many. Give you ideas. Taking care of one another. This is the natural way. Taking care and being cared for. This is the beautiful way. The way that our hearts are called. The way that our hearts feel most content, most belonging, most joy in this giving and receiving. And you have to catch it in the moment, because the thought will come and say, "Oh no, I shouldn't do that," because no, the moment you have a generous thought, do it. Take care. It's the number one paramita. And the paramitas, as I said in my last talk, are practices and their characteristics of enlightened beings. And it's number one. It's the practice that will cure you. If you're in a negative state of mind, if you're feeling depressed, if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling angry or irritated, if you just start doing kind things for other people, it will shift. It's a miracle. And because we're aligning with the natural way. And I was considering, why is it the number one characteristic of an enlightened being? An enlightened being. What is an enlightened being? Some teachers say we should throw out this word enlightenment, but we find it all over the Zen literature. Makes it sound like there's some grand thing that's not this, that we don't have enlightenment. I once asked my first Zen teacher, Satya, when I first met him, have you ever actually met an enlightened being? And he said to me, yes, everyone I meet. Hakuin Zenji says, all sentient beings are essentially Buddhas. Like water and ice, without water, no ice. Outside of us, no Buddhas. We can call it many things. We can call it peace. We can call it freedom. We can call it release. We can call it liberation, enlightenment. We can call it this. Maybe that's most accurate. This. Aligning with reality. The falling away of clinging. The falling away of the false idea of a self, of a separate self. Maybe enlightenment is just seeing things as they are. Byron Katie says enlightenment is to be enlightened, to feel lighter. To shine the light on how things are and to live in accord with that. I'll read a few enlightenment poems, awakening poems as they're often called. From this book, The First Free Woman, that I read from the other night. These are poems of the early Buddhist nuns, enlightenment poems. It's traditional to write a poem in Buddhism when you have an opening. So you might consider that. If there's a moment of deep beauty or release, how would you say it in a poem? How would you share that insight in a poem? So these are poems of the early Buddhist nuns, sort of interpreted and put into modern language. This one is from a nun named Chitta, which means heart. Somehow I kept climbing, though tired, hungry, and weak. Old, too. Somehow I kept sitting, but tired and weak. Just uncomfortable and old, too. At the top of the mountain, I spread my outer robe on a rock to dry, set down my staff and bowl, took a deep breath, and looked all around. It was windy up there. I was leaning back against a large gray rock. The darkness I had carried up and down a million mountains. Slipped off my shoulders and swept itself away on the wind. This one's from Dhamma, which means Dharma, which means truth. Another day walking in circles with an empty bowl, leaning on my staff in the middle of the road, my whole body shaking with hunger, what little strength I had left me. And as I was falling to the ground, I saw I was the spoonful of rice, and this whole world, the bowl. You can't miss it, even if you try. Enlightenment is this. One more. This is a woman named Sangha, community. It's cool to be named after the Sangha, huh? It's accurate. I'm not just this one, I'm this whole. When I left the only home I had ever known, I thought I left everything behind. But I was still carrying all the years of running back and forth and around in circles after this or that. Just sitting still, those circles have broken apart and been carried away by the simple wind blowing in and out. By this simple wind blowing in and out. And the power of our zazen. It's kind of a miracle, zazen is kind of a miracle. We carry all these things, we bring all these things, we're going around in circles, we have all these irritations and tightnesses and what ifs and doubts and self-criticisms and all this sort of circling around. And as we sit, something happens. Some mysterious clearing that we're not really doing, that somehow just the stillness allows it to work itself out, to melt the ice, to reveal the Buddha. Those drops of rain, the rustling of the mat, the feeling in the heart, each thing a gift. I'll read one more story for all of us and for Susie. This is from one of our Japanese ancestors from the 13th century, Chiyono. Chiyono was a servant in a Zen convent who wanted to practice Zazen. One day she approached an elderly nun and asked, "I'm of humble birth. I can't read or write and must work all the time. Is there any possibility that I could attain the way of Buddha even though I have no skills?" So some of us are going to go back to our jobs soon, or maybe already have gone back to our jobs. Is there any possibility that I could attain awakening, the way of the Buddha? I have to work all the time in this busy world. The nun answered, "This is wonderful, my dear. In Buddhism there are no distinctions between people. There is only this. Each person must hold fast to the desire to awaken and cultivate a heart of great compassion. Each person must hold fast to the desire to awaken and to cultivate a heart of great compassion. People are complete as they are. If you don't fall into delusive thoughts, there is no Buddha and no sentient being. There is only one complete nature. If you want to know your true nature, you need to turn toward the source of delusive thoughts. This is called Zazen. How many of us are doing this, tracing the thoughts back to the feeling in the body? What's the source of that feeling? Going back, tracing down. We don't need to be sitting in order to do it, although it helps. Giotto said with happiness, "With this practice as my companion, I have only to go about my daily life, practicing day and night." It's a good student. You ever had that thought? I'm going to practice day and night? Some of you have, I'm sure. This is the power of Sesshin, is that we constantly get encouraged to keep practicing. But we can take that on ourselves in our daily life. I used to always complain to Satya, my first teacher, when many of my first Sesshin, I just didn't want it to end because I just felt like I was just starting. I just got to the point where I could stay a little bit, and he said, the only difference between Sesshin and not Sesshin is that you decide to practice. So we can make this commitment to devote ourselves to awakening and to devote ourselves to this heart of compassion, this heart of generosity, day and night. So after months of wholehearted practice, she went out on a full moon night to draw some water from the well. The bottom of her old bucket, held together by bamboo strips, suddenly gave way, and the reflection of the moon vanished with the water. When she saw this, she attained great realization. Her enlightenment poem was this: "With this and that I tried to keep the bucket together, and then the bottom fell out. Where water does not collect, the moon does not dwell." Here we are always trying to keep the bucket together, the bucket of the self. Trying to, clinging to this and that, this way and that way. And then there's a possibility of release. The disappearance of the embodied illusion of being a separate me and having to maintain that me. And this can happen to a body that has no conceptual understanding. Eckhart Tolle is a very famous example of that. And one night the bucket just fell out. The bottom of the bucket just fell out, and he couldn't explain what happened, but only that he was at peace. So we don't need to have any idea about what it is really. Simply we have this North Star of the peace that we know in our hearts, of the freedom that we know is this life, the joy that we know is this life, and to let it flower, to accept it. I once heard someone say that it's not really a matter of awakening, it's rather a matter of accepting your awakening. That is already. It is already here. There's been this debate in Zen for centuries, the gradual versus the sudden. Suzuki Roshi said, awakening is like walking through a mist in the forest. As we practice, we start to get wet, and we don't really even notice until eventually we look down and we're completely soaked. Immersed in the water of our life. We are lovers of the truth. We are lovers of the truth. And so our practice is about entering the direct truth, the reality of this moment. Be it fear, where is that fear in the body? Irritation, where is that irritation? Embarrassment, where is that embarrassment? Discomfort, where is that discomfort? Always digging into the actual experience. What is the taste of tea, really? What is that sound of that car, really? What is that thing I don't like, really? So that we come to know actually what's going on here. Not just thinking about what's going on here. So why is generosity the number one quality of an enlightened being? As the quality of an enlightened being, a being that is free from clinging and sees things as they really are, feels things as they really are. Generosity is an accurate description of how things are. Generosity is a description of the living insight into non-separation. It's the natural tendency when we feel clearly that we are not separate. Generosity is the natural tendency. It's what's going on here. And that's why it feels so good to give and to receive. It affirms this together being, this shared being that we are, this flowing river of change, of giving and receiving. Usually we think that an accurate description of what's going on here is that I'm a person in time that is moving through the world, receiving and giving things. I'm receiving this talk, I'm giving this talk, I'm receiving this difficult emotion, I'm giving this thing, I'm receiving this schedule, I'm receiving this session. This is our normal way of thinking. But as we start to pay closer and closer attention, we see that that's not actually what's happening. There's not an individual here that's giving and receiving things. It's just giving and receiving. Sawaki Roshi says, heaven and earth give themselves. Air, water, plants, animals, and humans give themselves to each other. It is in this giving themselves to each other that we actually live. Whether you appreciate it or not, it is true. Here's another translation of this quote, translated from Japanese as part of a larger talk. Heaven and earth give, air gives, water gives, plants give, animals give, humans give. All things give of themselves to each other. It's only within this together giving that we survive, regardless of whether we are thankful for it or not. There's nothing we need to complain about. Nobody was granted life due to their personal merit, and no one can live just by using their own strength. But nonetheless, we're all still only concerned with our own pocketbook. You notice that? Notice how many thoughts are about me and my state, me and my predicament, as Eckhart Tolle says, me and my problems. Those are thoughts based in the illusion of separation, and they can be released. Stupidity means being preoccupied with your own body. Wisdom says, I am what I am, no matter how things end up. A person outside of the way is someone who only thinks of gain and loss. A devil is someone who makes a profit off of this. What a bore, making a long face and complaining about having no money, nothing to eat, and being stuck in debt. It's only because you believe that you have the right to revel in life and always feel good that you moan and groan about your poverty. Isn't that interesting, the sort of entitlement we have, that we think we should always feel good? We should always have the best upper. We even have enough to eat. He's talking to people who don't have enough to eat or don't have any money. He's talking like post-World War II Japan, and who are stuck in debt. Here, most of us have all those things, and yet we have what we call first world problems, right? Too much food, but it won't fit in my refrigerator. Oh, poor me. Once during the war, I visited a coal mine. With the same outfit and headlamp as the miners, I got into the lift and down we went. At one point when we were going down, it seemed to me as if suddenly we were going up again. But when I looked with my lamp at the wall of the shaft, I saw that we were still going down. In the beginning, when we were accelerating downwards, we could really feel that we were going downwards. Just when the velocity changed, it seemed to us as if we were going up again. In exactly the same way, when we think about our lives, we always go wrong when we mistake the fluctuating amounts for the sum. How quickly we make conclusions based on this limited view of what's going on in this moment. When we're living in this field of generosity, in this unbounded gift, and we get so... And then he ends this talk saying, losing is satori. Satori is another word for enlightenment. Losing is satori. Winning is illusion. Not coveting a single thing is the greatest gift you can give the universe. So the important thing is that we keep looking into this for ourselves. Could it be that we live in a field of generosity? Could it be that there is no me? What? What? That's kind of crazy. And yes, this is the essential teaching of Buddhism. So all of these obsessions and thoughts and habits of clinging are circling around nothing. We have to investigate this for ourselves. It's a beautiful inquiry to try to look for the me, or to question the thoughts about the me. Could it be that there are just phenomena appearing one after the other, just giving and receiving with no owner, with no doer? This is the central teaching of Buddhism. There's a teaching called the 3 marks of existence, the 3 marks of all things that exist. So that's forms, that's thoughts, that's feelings, that's sensations, perceptions, everything that appears, the sound of the rain, the feeling of not enough, whatever it is. All phenomenal conditioned things, all things that seemingly exist, have these 3 marks. Please make yourself comfortable if you need to. These 3 aspects, these 3 characteristics, and those 3 characteristics are that they are impermanent. They don't last. And this is very interesting investigation, is to see how nothing ever that comes into existence lasts. It always changes. It's impermanent. That it's marked by dukkha, meaning that it's unreliable, it cannot bring satisfaction, it's unstable. So we cannot find satisfaction in arranging conditions in any particular way. And it has no abiding self, no permanent self. These are all sort of different ways of saying the same thing in a way. Impermanent, unsatisfactory, unstable, and with no abiding self. So we think I'm suffering. We think there's an I that's permanent. Maybe suffering isn't permanent, but the I is permanent. But no, what is that? Suffering appears perhaps, but for who? If we really look, we don't find anything. We just find the appearance. Byron Katie says we narrate reality and we call it me. I'll read a little blurb I found online about anatta, which is the Pali word for no self. Not self, non-ego, egolessness, impersonality is the last of the 3 characteristics of existence. The anatta doctrine teaches that neither within the bodily and mental phenomena of existence, nor outside of them, can be found anything that in the ultimate sense could be regarded as a self, existing, real, ego entity, soul, or any other abiding substance. This is the central doctrine of Buddhism, and without understanding, any real knowledge of Buddhism is altogether impossible. It is the only really specific Buddhist doctrine with which the entire structure of the Buddhist teaching stands or falls. All the remaining Buddhist doctrines may more or less be found in other philosophic systems and religions, but the anatta doctrine has been clearly and unreservedly taught only by the Buddha, wherefore the Buddha is known as Anattavadi, or the teacher of impersonality. Mere suffering exists, no sufferer is found. The deeds are, but no doer or deeds is there. No doer of the deeds is there. Nibbana is, but the man that enters it, but not the man that enters it. The path is, but no traveler on it is seen. So this is something to investigate with this clear mind that we are cultivating in Sesshin. To look and see with each thing that arises, is there an owner? Or is it just arising on its own? Is there an openness in which it arises in and falls away in? The important thing is that we keep looking, and there's a difference between direct insight into this, which doesn't even have to be conceptual. Like I told the story about Eckhart Tolle, he just knew he was at peace. There's no thoughts about self or no self, or, so we can really confuse ourselves. Because there's a difference between direct understanding and conceptual understanding. The Buddha talked about these three ways of understanding, these three types of wisdom. The first one being a conceptual or intellectual understanding. Okay, it makes sense, all things are impermanent, they rise and they pass away. And that makes sense when I think about it. But to actually know that in a visceral sense, so that we don't cling to them because we know that they're not going to last. That's different. And the second type of wisdom is when we get a little taste of that. We know it, but we don't quite know it. And then the third is full embodied insight. So it's like, I thought of this example of like a pie. Like, I tell you there's going to be a pie in the kitchen after this, right? So I told you that you have a conceptual understanding. You imagine the pie, it's sitting on the counter, right? But you have no direct experience of that pie. But then if you smell the pie, oh, okay, I do have a little direct experience of that pie. Or maybe you walked in and you saw it, but now you don't see it. So you had some direct experience of it, but you don't see it now. And then the next level is you're actually eating the pie. Actually, wow. It's completely different. And it's like the two realms that we explore in Sesshin, the conceptual realm and thinking, and then all of a sudden we can snap into the actual. Wow. It was like we were in a dream. It's like we were in a dream. So could it be that everything is just this continual generosity, flowing, impermanent, not sticking anywhere? Could it be that everything is just a gift? Just a temporary gift, or just a river of gifts, one after the other, for no one, by no one. Just an ever-flowing river of giving itself to itself. And the point of all of these words is simply to help us to look directly at what is going on here. Because if we see really what is going on, we will let go. And all these forms, and all these practices, and all these words are simply to help free us. It says in the Grassroof Hermitage, the chant we sometimes chant, thousands of words, myriads of interpretations are only to free you from obstructions. But if you really want to know the undying one, if you really want to know the joy of being alive, if you really want to know this freedom, don't separate from this skin bag here and now. Well, this is the enlightenment that we're looking for. This. The feeling of the air on the skin, the sound of the voice, the sound of the rain, whatever feeling is in the body. Just a flowing river, not sticking anywhere. I'll close with a final poem. This is called Dhammadina, she who has given herself to the Dharma. She who has given herself to the truth. For so long I thought only of the river's end. Then one morning I set down my paddle to watch the sunrise over the eastern hills, only to find myself floating somehow gently upstream. I promise it was not what I expected.